Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling a question that I know many of you wrestle with. How do you really know if your security investments are paying off? We're diving straight into quantitative risk assessment. Think of it as moving beyond guesswork to actually put numbers on potential losses and the value you get from your security spending. Forget those vague feelings about risk for a moment. Our mission today is to show you the practical side of this structured, numbers-driven approach.
Exactly. So often when we talk about security, it's all about high, medium, and low risks. What quantitative risk assessment offers you is a way to translate those subjective terms into real financial figures,
Yeah.
both for the risks themselves and for how well your defenses are working. It gives you a much clearer picture of what's, at stake.
And to guide us through this, we're using a really insightful article from Detector Security. It's co-authored by Peter Gaudet from ManageXValue.com, who's like a real expert in building these quantitative risk management systems.
Yeah.
And David Yecke from Nikkei Security Consulting, who brings a ton of real-world experience in physical security. Their combined brain power gives us a really solid look at this.
Absolutely. What's so valuable about their article, for you listening, is that it doesn't just stay in the theoretical realm. It walks through a practical example, showing you exactly how this quantitative approach works, on the ground.
Yeah.
Now, the specific case they use is about physical security at a manufacturing company. But as we go through it, keep in mind how these core principles can be adapted to all sorts of risks that you might be dealing with in your own organization, cyber, supply chain, you name it.
Okay, so let's get into this example.
Right.
The authors describe a manufacturing company facing a pretty common headache. They've got valuable leftover materials from their production process, and they're storing it in a semi-open area on their property. Now, this isn't just trash. That actually has enough value to be resold. The problem, as you can probably guess, is that because it's valuable and relatively easy to resell, it's become a target for theft.
Right.
People are regularly finding ways to get over or through the perimeter fence to grab some of this material.
It's a scenario we see all too often, unfortunately. And the management at this company is rightly asking some tough questions. What's the actual financial hit we're taking from this? And even more importantly for you, what's the cost benefit of any security upgrades we might consider? They need hard numbers to justify those investments, and that's where this quantitative approach really shines.
Right. So the first step in their example was to do an initial quantitative assessment of things as they stood. And what they discovered was that with a 90% level of certainty, the annual losses from this kind of theft that includes the value of the store-in stuff and any damage to the fence were likely to be less than 14.1 million Hungarian forint.
Okay.
The expected annual loss, the average they could anticipate, was around 9.5 million forint. So right off the bat, you've got a financial picture of the problem.
That gives you, the listener, a crucial baseline. It's a starting point to really understand the financial scale of the issue. But to figure out the best way to tackle it, you need to really dig into the specifics of the risk.
Right.
The article outlines several key questions to define this risk context, and these are going to be essential for any effective risk assessment you do, whether you go fully quantitative or not.
Let's walk through these questions, and we'll keep using this manufacturing theft as our real-world example to make it concrete for you. The first question looks at business structure. In this case, it's pretty straightforward. A single company site is really the focus here. This helps to keep the initial analysis targeted.
Exactly. Now, if you're part of a larger, more complex organization, maybe with multiple locations or different business units, you'd need to factor that complexity into your risk assessment. Understanding the structure helps you pinpoint where the risks might appear and how they could potentially impact different parts of your operations.
The next question asks, what specific risk events are we actually worried about? In our example, the focus is very clearly on the theft of those production leftovers from that particular storage area. Being precise here is key for you.
Absolutely. A risk event is something specific that can lead to a financial or strategic impact on your company. By clearly defining what that event is, in this case, the physical theft of materials, you can then concentrate your analysis on all the things that might contribute to it happening.
We need to think about the important impacts if that risk event occurs. For our manufacturing company, the main impacts are financial losses, the value of the stolen goods, of course, and also the cost of having to repair that perimeter fence.
While financial impact is often the most direct and the easiest to put a number on, it's important for you to remember that this method can also incorporate other strategic impacts like potential environmental damage or even workplace safety issues.
Good point.
The key is to identify all the relevant consequences that could stem from that initial risk event.
The fourth question gets into threat actors. Who or what might be trying to cause this problem? In this scenario, the assessment considered external people coming onto the property, individuals who might have some inside knowledge about the materials, and even potentially organized criminal groups. So kind of understanding who your adversaries might be.
That's right. Knowing who the potential threat actors are is crucial for you because different actors are going to have different skills, resources, and motivations. This will then influence how likely an attack is and what kind of attack methods they might use.
Makes sense. Next up are attack methods. How might these threat actors actually go about stealing the materials? The example identifies two main ways, either climbing over the perimeter fence or finding a way to cut through it. So thinking about the how of the attack.
By thinking through all the different ways an attack could potentially happen, you can then start to think about the specific weaknesses in your current setup that need to be addressed,
Right.
and the types of defenses that would be most effective against those particular methods. This helps you target your security efforts.
Question number 6 is about attack surfaces. Where on our property or within our systems might these attacks actually occur? In this case, the primary attack surface is the perimeter fence of the manufacturing facility itself. So the specific point of vulnerability.
This really helps you narrow down where your protective efforts should be focused. In a more complex organization, you might have many different attack surfaces, both physical, like our fence, and digital, like your network infrastructure.
Yeah, true. Finally, we need to consider our existing protective capabilities. What security measures are already in place? For our manufacturing company, they have the perimeter fence itself, a camera system, but it doesn't cover the entire perimeter and isn't constantly monitored.
Okay.
And security guard patrols that happen 4 times a day. But these patrols usually only discover that a theft has occurred after the fact. So looking at your current security posture.
This is a really crucial step for you. You need to have a clear understanding of your baseline level of security before you can start to evaluate how effective any new security improvements might be. It also helps you to identify any obvious gaps in your current defenses that are leaving you vulnerable.
Okay, so we've built the foundation by understanding the risk context. Now here's where it gets really interesting. How do we actually put numbers on these risks for you? The article details a structured set of questions that are designed to quantify both the probability, which they mark with a V, and the impact marked with an H. Now, just to clarify, those come from the Hungarian words for probability and impact, because the original article was in Hungarian. We'll just refer to them as probability and impact questions to keep it straightforward for you. But this structured approach is what ensures you get a consistent and comparable evaluation.
Exactly. And that consistency is so important when you're trying to compare different risks or evaluate the potential benefits of different security investments. This structured approach gives you a framework to hang your analysis on.
Let's dive into these quantification questions. The first one, under probability V, is what possible attack methods can be used on our attack surfaces? In our example, as we discussed, both climbing and cutting the fence are the relevant method that could be used on that perimeter fence attack surface.
Okay.
So you're considering all the likely ways an attacker might try to exploit that vulnerability.
This really reinforces the point that you need to think broadly about how an attacker might try to achieve their goal. Don't just focus on the most obvious method. Consider all the feasible ways someone might try to exploit a weakness.
Next, under impact. What potential damage events could occur across different business units? Now, in our manufacturing theft scenario, it's a relatively simple one type of theft at one location. But this question is important for you to consider in more complex organizations,
Right.
where a single type of incident could have different ripple effects and financial consequences across various departments or locations.
That's a great point. Think about a data breach, for example. It could impact your customer service teams dealing with inquiries, your finance department potentially facing fines, and your legal team handling the fallout, all with different financial implications. This question prompts you to think about those wider impacts within your organization.
Back to probability, V. How frequently can we expect attacks to occur on our attack surfaces using specific methods? This is where you start to estimate how often those fence climbing and fence cutting attempts might happen on an annual basis.
Right.
This would likely involve looking at any historical data you have, industry trends for similar businesses, and maybe even getting expert opinions. It's about trying to get a handle on the likelihood of these events.
And it's really important for you to acknowledge that there's going to be some uncertainty here. You're not necessarily looking for an exact number, but rather a reasonable range or your best informed estimate based on the information you have available.
The next probability B question connects the attacks to the damage events. What damage events and in which business units might result from a successful attack? Again, in our scenario, it's pretty direct. If someone successfully breaches the fence, it leads to the theft of those materials from the storage area. It's about tracing that chain of events for you.
This step makes sure you're clearly linking the initial the attempted breach of the fence to the ultimate negative outcome, the loss of valuable materials. It's about cause and effect in the risk landscape.
Now, for a really crucial impact area, question for you. What is the financial impact of a damage event within a business unit? This is where we really start talking about the money. In the example, they use their historical records to estimate a range of potential losses per incident. A minimum of 35,000 foreign, a maximum of 8 million foreign, and a most likely cost of around 2.4 million foreign. What's really powerful here is that they can also express their level of certainty in these estimates based on how reliable their historical data is. So you're not just getting a number, but also a sense of how confident you can be in that number.
That ability to express your certainty is a major advantage of these quantitative methods for you. It lets you understand not just the potential financial hit, but also how confident you are in that estimation. A wider range between the minimum and maximum, or a lower certainty rating, tells you there's more uncertainty around the potential impact, which is valuable information in itself.
We then go back to probability with how relevant are our proactive defenses against specific attacks? This looks at how likely the existing fence, the current camera system, and those security patrols are to even encounter an attack that's happening. In this case, the fence is seen as very relevant because anyone trying to steal the materials has to interact with it.
Okay.
The camera system is less relevant due to its incomplete coverage, and the patrols are considered negligible in this context because they usually only discover the theft after it has already occurred. So thinking about how your defenses even come into play.
This highlights a really important point for you. Not all defenses are equally effective against all threats. A robust firewall might be very relevant if you're worried about a network attack, but it's completely irrelevant when you're talking about someone climbing over a physical fence.
Yeah, exactly. The next probability question digs deeper into how effective those defenses are if they do encounter an attack. How strong are our proactive defenses at our attack surfaces? Here, they assess how likely each defense is to actually stop an attack that it comes up against. The existing fence is rated as moderately strong. It might slow someone down, but it probably won't stop a determined thief. The current cameras are considered strong if they happen to capture an intrusion. Security can intervene. And the patrols are also strong. If they stumble upon an event in progress, they can react. So looking at the actual stopping power of your defenses.
This distinction between relevance and strength is key for you to grasp. A defense might be very relevant. An attacker absolutely has to deal with it, but not very strong. It's easily bypassed. On the other hand, you could have a very strong defense, but if an attacker can easily avoid it, it's not very relevant in preventing that specific attack.
We then shift back to impact age. How relevant are our reactive defenses in reducing the damage impact of specific events? In this particular theft scenario, the article considers how relevant it would be to try and identify the perpetrators and pursue legal action after a theft has occurred. So what can you do after something happens to minimize the damage?
Reactive defenses are what kick in after a risk event has actually taken place. Their goal for you is to try and minimize the negative consequences that have already unfolded.
And finally, the last impact question. How strong are reactive defenses within our business units? In this specific case, the reactive capabilities are assessed as being near zero once the test has been completed. The materials are likely gone, and the chances of recovering them are slim to none. So how effective are your after-the-fact measures?
This really underscores for you that in many security situations, and certainly in this physical theft scenario, prevention is much more effective than trying to recover after the fact. If your reactive capabilities are weak, it puts even more importance on having strong proactive defenses in place.
So after this initial assessment, the security manager proposes a specific improvement, upgrading the camera system to provide complete coverage of the entire perimeter and implementing line crossing detection.
Oh,
This
okay.
means that if anyone crosses a virtual boundary along the fence line, an automatic alert is immediately sent to the security center. It's a targeted solution to address those identified weaknesses.
This is a really smart, targeted improvement because it directly addresses the gaps they found in their initial security setup, the incomplete camera coverage, and the lack of real-time detection capabilities. This allows for a much faster response if someone tries to breach the perimeter.
And what's the result of this improvement on the risk levels, according to their quantitative analysis? They found a significant drop in the potential annual loss. The probability of the annual loss being under 5.3 million foreign with 90% certainty, and the expected annual loss plummets to just 1.2 million foreign.
Wow.
That's a huge difference for you.
That's a really substantial decrease in the anticipated losses, and it's directly linked to the implementation of those improved security measures. And this is where you, as a business leader, can really see the financial justification for investing in security. The numbers speak for themselves.
Exactly. When they factored in the initial investment and the ongoing operational costs of this enhanced camera system, the analysis showed that these security measures actually become a profitable investment in the short term, simply because of the much lower expected losses from theft. It's not just about preventing theft, it's about improving the bottom line for you.
This is the real power of quantitative risk assessment for you. It allows you to demonstrate a clear return on investment for your security spending, shifting the perception of security from just being a cost center to something that actually generates value and protects your assets in a measurable way.
And it's crucial for you to understand, as the article points out, that while this example is focused on physical security, this structured approach with these key questions isn't just limited to fences and cameras.
Yeah.
It gives you a consistent framework that you can apply to evaluate a really wide range of risks,
Right.
whether it's cyber threats, disruptions in your supply chain, even potential impacts from climate change, because those fundamental elements of a risk scenario, the likelihood, the impact, the threat, and your defenses are always present.
What's particularly valuable for you is the scalability of this approach. A company might start by visiting it in one specific area, like we've discussed with physical security, but once they see the tangible benefits of having these comparable and quantifiable risk assessments, they can then expand it to other departments and different types of risks across the entire organization. This allows for much smarter decisions about where to allocate resources and optimize investments across the board.
And at its heart, the article really emphasizes a few key principles of this quantitative approach that are important for you. It enables you to calculate a probability-adjusted financial impact of a potential loss, what they call an overall value-based risk.
Okay.
This is done by directly connecting how likely an event is with the financial consequences if it actually happens.
Yeah.
So you get a much clearer picture of the true financial risk you're facing.
And this estimated risk can then be analyzed from so many different angles that are useful for you. You can look at it from the perspective of specific business units that might be affected, the different types of damaging events you're concerned about, the potential financial impacts, the specific attack surfaces that are vulnerable, the various methods attackers might use, the different types of threat actors involved, and even how effective your current defenses are. This multifaceted view gives you a much deeper and more comprehensive understanding of your risk landscape.
They also address how they deal with uncertainty, which I know is a big question for many of you when you think about putting hard numbers on risks. The method often uses something called Monte Carlo simulation. Now, don't let the name intimidate you.
Right.
Think of it like this. Instead of needing a precise number for every single question, you can provide a range of possible estimates and the likelihood of those estimates being correct.
Okay.
The simulation then runs this scenario thousands of times, each time picking a random value within those ranges to give you a much better understanding of the spectrum of potential outcomes and the probabilities associated with them. It's a way to quantify those information gaps and still get a valuable picture.
That's a really crucial point for you to understand. It acknowledges that there will always be some level of uncertainty when you're assessing risks. By using techniques like Monte Carlo simulation, you're not trying to pretend you have perfect data.
Yeah.
Instead, you're embracing the uncertainty and getting a much more realistic view of the potential range of outcomes rather than relying on a single number that might be way off. And as you gather more information and expertise, you can always refine those initial estimates.
Finally, the article really boils down the core logic of any risk event to a statement that's both simple and really insightful for you. Someone or something attacks the company somewhere, somehow.
Hmm.
This is either stopped in its tracks by your proactive defenses, or a damaging event occurs with negative consequences that your reactive defenses might, hopefully, lessen. It's a clear way to think about the whole risk picture.
It's a very clear and concise way for you to think about the entire life cycle of a risk event, from the initial threat all the way through to the potential impact and the role that your security measures play at each stage.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I think what's really clear for you is that while those individual questions in a quantitative risk assessment might seem straightforward on their own, it's the structured way they're put together and applied that gives you a consistent and, crucially, a quantifiable way to evaluate risk.
Hmm.
It moves us away from just relying on gut feelings and gives you a solid foundation for making informed decisions about where to invest your security dollars for the best possible return.
Absolutely. And we really encourage you to think about these questions in the context of the specific risks that your own organization is facing. While the math in those simulations might sound complex, remember that there are readily available tools and resources out there that can handle a lot of that heavy lifting for you.
Right.
The key first step is to adopt this structured way of thinking about and analyzing your risks.
And with that in mind, here's a final thought for you to consider. If this quantitative approach can bring such clarity and a clear financial justification to your security investments, what other areas within your business that might seem a bit less tangible could really benefit from a similar kind of structured, numbers-driven analysis?
Mm.
It makes you wonder where else this level of rigor could unlock some really valuable insights for you. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.